Hello and welcome to another segment of 2 Minutes with Tim here on Heavenward Thinking. Today I want to challenge you about Jesus as the fulfillment of the law in Matthew chapter 5. So I'm going to read from verse 17 through verse 20. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. A lot of times in Christianity, we tend to set aside certain parts of Scripture. We set aside the Old Testament, or we set aside a certain verse that we don't like. But we see here in Matthew chapter 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is challenging people that all of Scripture is relevant. He's not setting aside even the smallest part, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen. He's not getting rid of any of it because Jesus came to fulfill it. And he fulfilled the law. He fulfilled Scripture. He fulfilled so many prophecies, and he changed everything by coming as a human being and dying on the cross in place of us. So he fulfilled Scripture, and all the legalism is set aside, but that doesn't mean that the relevancy of the Old Testament is set aside. So as Christians, we really need to look at all of Scripture as relevant. All of it is useful for teaching and in training us in righteousness. So when we look at Scripture, we need to see it with the eyes of Christ. We need to think with a heavenward perspective and not set aside things that we don't agree with or disagree with. We need to look at all of it as Jesus would and be challenged by it and be transformed by it, so that we can live a transformed life where other people will look to us and then see Jesus shining through us as we live out and carry out all of Scripture. Join us next week for another challenge with 2 Minutes with Tim.